Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Professional Insights. The question of the day is, do you think your IRA is a gift to your family? Because it might actually be a tax time bomb. And I know that's kind of crazy, but in this episode, I sit down with Michael Clarke, co-founder of Protection Point Advisors again, and we're going to uncover the unintended consequences of leaving behind a large IRA, if there are some. But for instance, the Secure Act changed everything. And if your beneficiaries aren't prepared, they could lose a big chunk of that inheritance to tax. So before you assume your IRA will just take care of your kids, hit that like and subscribe button, and let's get into this. Morning, Mike.
Good day, sir.
How are you this morning?
I've had one cup of coffee, so I think I'm reasonably human, and ready to go.
Just ready to go. Great. So, Mike, let's kind of start with this kind of big picture.
Right.
Why are IRAs often seen as the cornerstone of retirement planning?
Well, I think IRAs, along with qualified plans in general, 401ks, 403bs, these kinds of things, really years ago, decades ago, replaced traditional pension plans. It used to be back in, I don't know, post Great Depression, you were working for a big company like General Motors or General Electric or General something. And they had a pension plan, and so your retirement income was going to be pension, Social Security, and whatever other net worth you managed to amass during your career. That was sort of the equation. Well, and pension plans are known as what are called defined benefit plans, and that simply means you're promised a benefit. And they were done away with because companies just couldn't sustain them anymore. They're just too expensive. So they were done away in favor of what are called defined contribution plans, 401ks, 403bs. And an IRA is just the individual version of that. And it allows you to put money in on a tax deductible basis, and the earnings and all the growth is going to accrue in a tax deferred on a tax deferred basis. Then when you pull the money out, you have to pay taxes on it then. So it really is a postponement of the inevitable. And the idea being that, when you're in retirement, you're in a lower tax bracket. So, therefore, the tax burden is lighter. So that's the whole equation. That's how all of this thinking, came to be.
Now, you and I joked a little bit about this, right? If somebody were to leave a large IRA, it's like, oh no, you just left me a large sum of money,
Right.
But on the surface, that seems like a great idea. But why can it be an unintended problem for the people who inherit it?
Well, I think first and foremost, if you're going to inherit any retirement plan, you have to understand how to inherit it favorably, and a lot of people don't. So usually, what it's in the beneficiary's best interest to set up what's called a beneficiary IRA. We just call them stretch IRAs, but the tax rules changed in 2017 regarding how you could inherit these. So whereas before you could pay the taxes over the course of your life based upon your age. So for example, let's say you inherited a large IRA when you were 45. Well, you were allowed to take out what's called a minimum distribution each and every year based upon how long you were going to live, at least according to mortality tables. And then you just have to pay the taxes on whatever the distribution was. Well, if you're 45, if your life expectancy is well into your 80s, well, that's a 40-year time horizon that you get to pay the taxes over. So it's pretty forgiving. They changed that in 2017. Well, now it's a 10-year time horizon. Okay, you got to pay all the taxes over 10 years. Okay. And if you're not careful, you might have to pay them all at once because setting up a beneficiary IRA, that that's not an automatic. Okay. So you have to sort of understand what you've inherited and how to make the most of it.
So let's look and dig into that a little bit, Mike. So 45 years old, you inherit something. Now, obviously, we've got a large swath of the population going into their later years, and there's going to be a massive transition of wealth, as they say. So you're 45, your parents pass away, they leave you $1 million. What does that mean on that 10-year rule?
Well, it means you're going to have to pay taxes on $1 million over the course of the next 10 years.
So no matter what, you're taking out X amount of money per year over the next 10 years. And
Yeah, no,
what happens if that money's not gone in 10 years?
well, again, you just have to pay the taxes over 10 years. Whether the money's gone or not is irrelevant. That just kind of depends on the growth of the money.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
You just have to pay taxes on what you inherited over 10 years. Okay.
Gotcha.
So it's pretty cut and dry, but I would say this, if you're looking at doing an estate plan and you're looking at your financial plan and you're looking at your projections and all the things that, you should be looking at, hopefully either by yourself or in concert with an advisor, it's always good to look at, trying to spend down the retirement money during your lifetime if you can. Okay.
Mm.
And the reason for that is that any other type of asset tends to be, you're able to leave the other assets tax-free, okay, because of what's called the basis step-up rule, which simply means that all the gain on these investments is wiped away on the date of your passing, and it's as if your heirs inherited the assets tax-free. Okay.
Gotcha.
So, from a planning perspective, retirement plans really are not meant to be we're not meant to be things that you are for the next generation. Okay. They're meant to be spent during your lifetime. At least they're designed that way.
Interesting. And so in doing that, like how important is it to keep your beneficiary designations up to date?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. All the time. I mean, I'm not saying you look at them every 6 months, but you might want to look at them every so often to make sure they reflect your estate plan. It's an easy thing to do. And by the way, retirement plans allow you to name beneficiaries. So we get this question a lot. Should my retirement plan be in the trust? No. First of all,
Hmm.
a trust can't own an individual retirement plan. So that's, yeah, well, no. Well, first of all, let me back up. Some people say, can the trust own it? No, it's got to be in your name. Should I make the trust the beneficiary? In 99% of the cases, that's not a good idea. Okay, because the rules regarding how a trust can inherit they're different. Okay, than how individuals can inherit. Okay, so you generally don't want to make a trust beneficiary of an IRA, with the exception, and then I'm getting into some complex concepts here. I mean, if the trust has what's often known as pass-through or see-through language, meaning that the asset can pass through the trust and then the trustee can set up a beneficiary IRA. And this is generally done when you don't have a great deal of confidence in your beneficiaries and their ability to hold on to the money. I think that's the reason you might do it. You want some protection. But if you're not concerned about that, it's generally just a good idea to just name beneficiaries on your IRA, and the trust doesn't need to be involved in it because it's going to pass by operation of beneficiary. Okay.
So with that, I mean, there's a lot to that, Mike, but
Right.
the one thing that came to my mind when I was listening to that is, let's take that example of a 45-year-old inheriting a large sum of money,
Right.
and let's scoot that down to say a 21-year-old.
Yeah.
So is that kind of the situation where you may want to put that in a trust versus giving it to that 21-year-old?
Well, usually the language of most trusts would mean that, I mean, in a case like that, if let's say the language of the trust is that the 21-year-old doesn't get their full inheritance until they're 30, which is common. Okay.
Okay.
You see commonly that the trusts will reflect age 30, sometimes 35, sometimes 40 and beyond. Like, you don't get your inheritance until you get to be of a certain age. In a case like that, then the trustee would open up a beneficiary IRA and then just pay the taxes incrementally as over the 10-year period. And then I suppose in this case, the 21-year-old would, if they were to get it when they were 30, they would have one more year of responsibility to do that on their own. And then after that, whatever's left over is whatever is left over. So it would be primarily the trustee's responsibility to see that happens.
So the 21-year-old gets $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just say over 10 years, that grows to 2 million.
Right.
Are they paying, due to the 10-year rule, are they paying taxes on the million? And then eventually pay the taxes on the other million, or is it
Well,
as it
no,
grows?
they're paying taxes on whatever is distributed each year.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And so it's incremental. It just has to be done over 10 years. You got to pay full taxes over 10 years. That's what the rule says.
Okay.
Okay.
And then like this, obviously there's some planning and involved in this. How can poor timing around these distributions push someone into a higher tax bracket with obviously unintended consequences?
Um, I suppose, I mean, you take out a large distribution in the early years, or I don't know. I mean, you're not incremental about the distributions, which means you're pushing out large distributions to make sure you keep pace with what your responsibility is, or maybe you do at the end. I don't know. It depends. The timing of the distributions could do that. Okay. Depending
Interesting.
upon how large they are. So, yeah, it's probably important to be mindful of that, I think.
Now, one caveat, and I don't want to get too deep into the weeds in terms of strategies, Mike, because we can have conversations about each one of these individual topics. But when does it make sense for somebody with that kind of retirement account or IRA to start considering Roth conversions as a way to reduce those future taxes?
Well, first of all, I think the first consideration is, do you need the money? Are you dependent upon it for income? Okay. Again, I think the primary consideration for people doing financial planning, and you're looking at retirement income projections and all that, the primary consideration should be, do you have enough? Okay.
Okay.
Because some people want to look at Roth conversions without fully considering whether or not it's going to impair their ability to maintain their lifestyle. And that should be priority one. But once you've determined that, okay, I have enough money from various sources, and now all of a sudden my IRA or my retirement plans, I don't need them as much or really at all. Uh, yeah, I think you could consider doing a Roth conversion as a way of maybe unburdening your heirs with these taxes. The idea really is you're kind of paying the taxes for them is what you're doing. Okay. You're paying them
Uh,
during your lifetime so they don't have to pay it when the asset is inherited. Um, this is something though that should be done on a case by case basis. That you really should look at Roth conversions kind of like a medical diagnosis. Everybody's different, and you want to go to the doc. If you're going to go to the doctor and get a proper diagnosis, you should get a proper diagnosis here. It's a really good idea for some people. It's not so much for others, depending upon how old you are, depending upon where you pay the taxes from. Generally speaking, Roth conversions can work really well if someone's young enough, and if you have the ability to pay the taxes on the conversion from accounts that are non-retirement accounts. That's when it starts to work really well. And of course, when someone is just not dependent upon the money for income, you've got enough money coming from other places.
and you mentioned, paying those taxes in your life so the heirs don't. Is that kind of the role that some people use when buying life insurance as well? So they prepay the taxes for their heirs.
Well, yeah, I mean that's a strategy that can work as well. Like, I mean, I've seen it where the minimum distributions on large retirement plans pay as a life insurance premium, and
Um,
upon death, the life insurance premium essentially replaces the taxes that were paid on those distributions. Again,
mm,
whether that math works or not, again, it's a case by case basis. Someone has to be young enough, they have to be healthy enough, because if you're going to buy life insurance, you're going to be healthy enough to get it.
sure.
So you got to be young enough, you got to be healthy enough, and probably the distribution has to be large enough to pay a premium on a large enough life insurance policy that, again, all the math works, it all washes. I can't say whether I don't want to, this is not a boilerplate application.
Right.
This
Right.
is done on a case by case basis.
Interesting. And then, so Mike, obviously, some of these things are getting ready to sunset. So, like as an example, the estate tax exemption is expected to drop, I believe, at the end of 2025,
Right.
or they're soon thereafter.
Mhm.
How is this going to affect kind of the estates of families with large IRAs and large estates?
Well, first, I'll say that it's highly likely that that estate tax exemption goes way down, which is the fear of some people. I think historically just hasn't done that. So I think what's likely is more or less stays where it is. And right now you got to be worth, God, what is the number? I think about, you have to be, as a couple, you have to be worth 25 million, I think, something like that, before the estate tax starts to
Oh,
be an
wow.
issue. So
Okay.
you got to be worth a lot. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, if it's any large asset that's includable in your taxable estate, if it starts to push you over that threshold, yeah, that's when estate taxes can become an issue. Which is all the more reason to kind of get out ahead of it. If you think your net worth, so if your net worth is either, if it's either there, it's above that threshold, or it's going to get there, that's all the more reason to start down the road of doing some advanced estate planning. And there are all kinds of advanced planning techniques. And we work with a lot of attorneys that deploy those when they're necessary. So I don't want to say it's an easy thing to get out ahead of, but it is something you can get out ahead of with proper planning. That would be my suggestion.
And for someone listening, Mike, and I know you kind of alluded to this, but somebody listening to that has a large IRA that may be still under that threshold. Like, what is that first step they should take? Like right now, today, because it is a process, and it's not overnight. There's conversations that need to be had with
Yeah.
family, loved ones, anybody involved. But what is that first step that they should take today?
Well, if you have a large look, if you have a large IRA, that I think you have to consider, to what extent am I dependent upon this for income? Okay. And if the answer is I'm not dependent on it at all, then if you're looking, then yeah, you consider maybe a Roth conversion. Okay. Whether that makes sense for you, because again, you're paying the taxes in advance so that your heirs don't have to pay it. You're you're converting a taxable asset into a tax-free asset. Okay. You want to be mindful of maybe where it might push your tax liability up. Okay.
Yep.
The best equation is to do, not the best, but a common way to do it is do incremental Roth conversions over a period of years, so you don't push yourself up into a higher tax bracket, because everything you take out of everything you convert that's added to your taxable income. Okay. So there's kind of a precise choreography to this that sometimes can exist over a period of, 5, 10, 12, 15 years. Okay. Where you're doing these incremental conversions over a long period of time. But it is generally something that is worthy of consideration if you're not dependent upon the asset for income, or to the extent you're perhaps maybe maybe you're only dependent on half of it. And maybe you could consider this with the other half. But yeah, I think a Roth conversion is something to look at.
Well, no, I appreciate the time, Mike. Any final thoughts on this? I know it's a big topic.
Well, I mean, I think it goes to financial planning and retirement income projections. I think there is an interesting. It's interesting how the math works, because I've said this to clients, and I want to say going back 10, 15 years, where I could see very early on that they were going to get to a point that they were going to have more money than they could consume. Okay,
Gotcha.
that they were going to get to the point where their net worth was going to grow faster than their ability to spend it, and they didn't believe me, by the way, at the time. They're like, oh, no way. And I don't know what it is with people like that, where they think at some point in their life they're going to be living underneath the freeway and foraging for food. But that's just kind of the mentality. But, the final thought is to always be, again, plug into your financial planning, understand your financial plan. And if you're going to get to that point where you have more than you need, and it really, to the extent that you have more than you need, becomes about legacy in the next generation, that's when a lot of these discussions are appropriate. And maybe an advanced estate planning discussion in concert with an attorney, maybe a Roth conversion discussion. Your financial life sort of changes form as you get older, and so it's all the more reason to be managing all these things and optimally, and making sure the puzzle pieces fit together as well as they can.
I love it.
And by the way, the last thing is, make up your mind about what you want your legacy to mean.
It's important, right?
Yeah.
have those conversations. Mike, thank you. Appreciate that. Any questions, leave those in the comments. Obviously, our contact information will be in the description. Hit that like and subscribe button. We're here every Tuesday morning for conversations just like this. But Mike, thank you for your time. I do appreciate it.
Thanks, sir.